Hello, welcome to Navigating to Success. I'm your host, Jeff Carlton, Focal Point Business Coach. And today I'm really excited to have Nick Runyon from MagDrive, CEO. Very interesting company doing some exciting stuff with something that's been around for years since the Romans, but they're taking it to a new level and they're dealing with lots of interesting organizations and all types of fluids. Um, Nick has a pretty impressive background himself as a COO, and marketing and speaking. So, Nick, why don't you tell us about MagDrive and what you've
Happy
got
to,
going on?
yeah, happy to. And thanks for having me, Jeff. It's exciting to be a part of this conversation. My background, as you mentioned, I've held multiple executive roles. I kind of consider myself a marketer, but it's always been in software, mostly software, marketing, and advertising. MagDrive Technologies is involved in hardware. And like you mentioned, valves is the space that we're in. Valves haven't really changed since they were invented. It's some kind of mechanism inside a pipe that gets turned to allow a fluid or a gas to flow. Just like, the faucet on your sink or, your hose bib in your garden, valves operate the same way, whether they're used for, aerospace or cryogenics or oil and gas. MagDrive Technologies is focused on bringing a new solution, a clean technology to this industry. We are really focused on the methane problem, which is big in the news right now. I just got back from COP28 where we were speaking about this. So there's a lot of different applications, but to explain MagDrive, I'm going to focus on the methane problem. So methane is an invisible gas, and it's been an invisible problem that's becoming more visible to the public as technology has improved. Some of your viewers might know that methane is 28 to 34 times more harmful to the environment than CO2. And when you think about methane, think about natural gas. The problem with valves is that they account for about 60% of fugitive emissions. And it's because all valves leak at the valve stem. So this is the problem that MagDrive technology solves. We cap the valve stem, we seal it in a solid wall chamber, and we use magnetic actuation through that solid container in order to operate the valve, thereby saving 60% of fugitive emissions from oil and gas operations and eliminating that impact, that 28 times potent impact of methane. So we're really focusing on bringing this product to market in the natural gas and oil refinery space.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. So, tell me the structure of the company wise. You guys you have valves out on market. Um, are you manufacturing in Bozeman?
We have in the past, so we are relatively young. I mean, I should say MagDrive's been in what I would call a research and development phase for probably 10 years. So we've got a portfolio of patents, about 14, 15 different patents that have been issued. So a strong IP moat. That that book of intellectual property was really developed in projects with companies like NASA, the Department of Defense, some different like marine applications over the past 10 years. But MagDrive was founded in 2022 to really commercialize this product. So early on, we were doing prototypes, samples, really short run, kind of like individually machined type of manufacturing in Montana. But long term, and what really kicked off last year in 2023 is a licensing revenue model. So we're working with some of the largest valve companies in the world, licensing our technology and our know-how to allow them to tap into their scaled manufacturing and bring this product to market on a global scale.
So companies like FlowServe and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, there's you could a quick Google search of industrial valve companies would give you a list of dozens, and we've been in contact with like all of the top 10. So
Awesome. How many employees? What's the size of the company right now?
yeah, again, so like startup, so pretty small. We've got 5 employees, and the benefit that we have is that we really have experts on the team, some as co-founders, and some as employees that are experts in fugitive emissions and valve technology. I mean, in a lot of ways, we are, as a company, really sought after to speak on kind of emerging technology in the valve space and in this area of fugitive emissions. We gave 12 keynotes last year at conferences like Valve World and Fugitive Emissions Summit, and the American Petroleum Institute Summit.
Oh, really cool. So it's mostly you guys are on the design and innovation side currently, and not and you're outsourcing the manufacturing to um, those bigger valve companies or machine shops um, in the regions that they're going to be used.
Yeah, I wouldn't use the word outsourcing though. And the reason is because that we founded this company to solve a gigantic global problem. So the EPA recently published an article that said, if the energy industry, oil and gas operators, were able to reduce methane emissions by 45%, that would equal a global savings of approximately $470 billion.
Wow.
So this is a huge problem from a health and environmental standpoint, but it's also a big like monetary problem. I mean, in the
Sure.
case of natural gas, methane is literally the product.
Right.
Natural gas, 90% methane. So there's huge product loss. Um, MagDrive as a company is not going to be able to meet that need on its own. So that's where we really landed on this licensing revenue model. We want to make this technology available to as many manufacturing partners as possible in as short amount of time as possible.
Okay. Yeah, that helps me get the scope and the scale. So, switching to the licensing model and starting the business. So, when was the business actually? When was MagDrive uh, formed initially before you came on board? Or
So I'm a co-founder. We formed it in 2022.
okay, all right. So, yeah, really fairly new. Um, what what would you say the so it's fairly purpose-driven work. Um, what would you say the differences between starting the company and running the business are, though? The
Uh,
business side versus the,
yeah, that's a great question. I mean, the startup phase includes so many different challenges. It's this process of every single day something else pops up that has to be solved. Everything from did we file our taxes? Did we remember to tell the accountant, that the bank account balance is low, or so like all kinds of like startup kind of problems.
sure.
Eventually, you can hire employees. We start really kind of our business development motion, and that brings a whole new set of challenges that kind of brings us into like the operational side. So what we're talking about now and focused on is how do we really well, and actually with manufacturing and this prototyping, we've had to go through a lot of product validation. So since starting the company, we've placed product in 3 different US refineries around the country, and there's a lot of regulation in these environments. And so we're using
Yeah.
like industry best practices to measure and validate that our product is in fact zero emissions, something that's never been achieved before in this space. So there's like a body of work that I would also put in the startup phase for product validation. Now that that's been done, we've really shifted to how do we make the results of this product validation known? How do we solicit interest from licensing partners? how do we move through that process efficiently of signing on new licensing partners? And then what are the legal aspects of writing those contracts? And that's really that transition from startup to business operations long term, that we're right in the middle of that transition right now.
So yeah, I mean, you basically gave the definition of scaling. Um, yeah, it's what it sounds like. Um, all right. So how consuming is it as a roughly 2-year CEO now? How is it, how do you maintain that work-life balance of, or
Yeah.
or do you feel like a fireman? You're running out on emergency calls every time the buzzer goes off.
Thankfully, it's not the first time I've done this. I've started a couple of companies. I've worked for different companies and taken them through different phases of growth. When we began this endeavor, I had a conversation first with my wife and then with my family. And I just said, hey, look, this is like, I don't know exactly what's going to happen, but I know that it's going to change every day and it's going to be a hard push. And so we had a conversation about how do we be intentional about time spent together. I'm kind of like a fluid person when it comes to calendars and scheduling and things like that. So what's driven my interest in really kind of getting more scheduled is this issue of work-life balance and specifically family time. Um, we've got 5 kids, they range from 7 to 18 years old. So I've got like all phases of like kid life happening. Um, we were just upfront with the family at the beginning about like, this is going to be hard, and there's some times where I'm not going to be available. Like right before Christmas, there was a 60-day stretch where I was in 7 different countries, and that was tough. But it made like the Christmas New Year's break really intentional. There's a need to make sure that we're pouring back into the time there. So, and the other thing I'll say is I've got a great team. I mean, we have my co-founders. I've known them since I was, in college, and we've added a couple of employees to the team that are just tremendous, great team dynamics, good team fit, and we've got a lot of transparency and honesty among the team about challenges that are coming up, how we're going to delegate, and also just where are people falling short that we like, how do we pick up the slack? It's really a good kind of team approach that everybody helps shoulder the burden. So can't
When
do
you're
this without a team.
Yeah, and when you're lean like this, when you're small, keeping that synergy is important. And I think I really appreciate the word about being intentional with your time and your scheduling, and being deliberate is a key factor to being successful. Um, you kind of you alluded to, you're basically in a scaling phase, working for marketing partner. Where do you see yourself in 12 months and 36 months?
Yeah, it's a critical period of time for MagDrive. I see us continuing to engage new licensing partners. Um, I think that the industrial valve industry is relatively slow moving to other industries that I've been in the past. Yeah.
Change is scary.
Change is scary and change is also risky. I mean, the Wall Street Journal had this great article, actually it was a tragic article, but it just clearly defined like for the public that I don't think is aware of the dangers. It shared this story about two brothers that worked at a refinery in Ohio, and they were on a turnaround. So this is where, you know, valves and different piping and things are being replaced while there's a shutdown. You have to do this quickly because time is money. And there was an invisible gas cloud that ignited, and both of these guys lost their lives. If something goes wrong, the consequences can be deadly. And so it's right to be cautious. And uh, we, of course, have an interest from an environmental standpoint, from a growth standpoint, from cash management, like we want to do this quickly. So it's trying to balance those two things. The next 12 to 36 months is going to be critical for that. But we are laser focused on bringing MagDrive technology product to the market specifically for oil and gas refineries and natural gas producers. So I think that at the end of that 3 year cycle, we want to see really just a deep penetration of this new product being vetted, verified, and adopted into the market. And I think that we have some tailwinds to enjoy with that. There's a lot of methane regulations driving change. Um, I mentioned I was at COP28. There was over 50 oil and gas companies that signed methane reduction pledges. Now, the media will say, like, is this real? Is this just, greenwashing? From our conversations, we see a real intention and a real interest to change the way that these companies are producing energy and help to aid in that energy transition that we hear so much about.
Well, you mentioned the original technology was developed with some governmental agencies like NASA and stuff like that. Do we have some MagDrive valves up in the ISS and on any of the SpaceX NASA launches?
Um, we so some of these are confidential conversations. I will say,
I 30-year military stuff. I
yeah,
get
yeah.
it.
I will say we've been on site and are exploring opportunities with both NASA and SpaceX, which is pretty exciting. Um,
Very
you know,
exciting. Yeah.
one of our first projects that we developed was with NASA on a planetary lander. They were having trouble containing cryogenic helium. So this is
Well, that's
3,500.
huge.
Yeah, I mean, it's 3,500 PSI. It's, I think, minus 300 Fahrenheit, if I remember correctly. And helium is a very, very small molecule. They pressurize fuel tanks with helium. And when you're trying to get a rocket off the ground, like every ounce really matters. So we were able to reduce the weight, uh, keep helium in the tank. It was an unsolvable problem prior to MagDrive. There's, I think, some opportunity there that we are exploring from like custom engineering projects. But being so early and with such a small team, we're really trying to like balance that against staying focused on this methane problem that seems to have more immediate viability. But we'll
Sure.
always take a call from any of these space agencies. It's fun.
Well, and that's a great thing is that your R&D is keeping up, but you have to sustain it. So you got at the end of the day, you have to look at where your fiscal viability is, right?
That's exactly right.
Yeah, I like it. So if you had a magic wand, there's one thing that you could fix, one challenge that you're facing right now, and you could fix it tomorrow, what would it be?
I would say it's really around business development, and I've built business development efforts in the past. They are always complex. There's so many variables. It's understanding, the landscape of the accounts that you're trying to sell into and finding a team or a person who can really take that understanding of an account profile and help build kind of an effective entry into sales conversations. And when I say sales, in this case, I'm talking about like licensing, engaging partners on licensing. Um, that's I would say our biggest constraint today. That's the first problem that I would solve with my magic wand if I could.
Good enough. I think a lot of people share that. Well, we'll wrap it up there. This is the part that I hate is when the conversation has to stop. But Nick, um, really exciting technology. Really excited for what you're doing. Really excited you're doing it in Montana and in the Mountain West. Love to see business like this starting up. not in the urban centers, but in places where people want to live. So fantastic. Um, for everybody watching, we'll see you on the next edition of Navigating to Success.